Good morning, everyone. Glad to have you joining us today. This morning, we are joined by, like Emily said, Tom Emery, and it is a pleasure to have you here, Tom, with us today because you get to talk a little bit about the history and like paleontology. And what I personally like to hear a lot of times with our member meetups is the story behind, how you got to where you're at, the path, and what set you in that direction. So Tom, good morning. How are you doing today? Do you have your
I'm
cup of
great,
coffee?
Hector. Yes, I do. Some chai. I mean, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, any kind of hot beverage right now, it's a welcome beverage. But Tom, what would what would you say that is your story that led you to the museum, or how did you get to where you're at today?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting path. I think that's true for most people, right? You know that you as you go through life, you have to choose a path, right? Or sometimes it chooses it for you. But once you enter, let's say, a new door, you're in a room that's new and exciting, and there are a bunch of doors in that room too, and you pass through those, and it kind of by fate, so to speak, or by design, you end up going down a path that you maybe not have thought about before. So for me, I never thought I'd be a scientist or a paleontologist when I was a kid. I mean, I certainly loved the outdoors, and I spent a lot of time outside playing with my brothers and friends and exploring, making forts, climbing trees, falling out of trees, learning about the natural world, spending a lot of time at the beach, um, surfing. And when there were no waves or it was blown out, I could always look at the cliffs and learn something about that. But um, I started out in college as a photography major, fine art photography, and but I had always had this interest in mathematics and kind of science. But I took a geology class and it really kind of changed my life. And I decided very quickly and really without a lot of thought, become a geology major at San Diego State back in 1969, a few years ago.
Yeah.
Um, of the various paths within geology, again, going through these different doors and continuing to focus, I decided that paleontology, the history of life, was the really most fascinating part of geology for me. And so I started down that path and um, graduated from San Diego State in 1972, and I worked for a while as a micropaleontologist looking at core samples from oil well drilling to try to tell the time and help them correlate. And then got tired of that because everything was a secret. And I went to the museum in 1978 as a volunteer in paleontology after a graduate degree at USC. And then I've been at the museum as an employee since 1979.
Wow, it's always fascinating when I hear a lot of our staff and a lot of our scientists say how they got involved was a lot of times volunteering and
Mm-hmm.
spending time with mentors or spending time with people that were there before them and working alongside them. Along those lines, Tom, like what would you say was the role of mentorship? Was it a big role? Did it play a big factor in you becoming the scientist that you are today?
Well, I've been thinking about that. And actually, when I was in high school, I had a mathematics teacher, Mr. Holtby, who really made me feel that I could do mathematics. Before that, I wasn't quite sure about it, and it became really a joy. I really was fascinated by mathematics and the way it made you think or helped you think, and so it instilled in me the fact that I could be um, a scientist at some point in my life, right? So then, yeah, there were a couple of other people along the way that really helped me out. Um, but in college, I had some really good professors that inspired me. Phil Kern at San Diego State, and Robert Douglas at USC, and Blair Van Valkenburg at UCLA. So And at the museum, it's just such a fantastic group of people, come and go. I was there early on with scientists like Reed Moran in botany, who was iconoclastic to say the least, but um, he showed me that you could do this for a living, right? So I don't know, just along the way, some great people.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I see it. When I joined the museum, that was a common thread that I heard. It was the people there that bring the value to the museum. But another thing that also brings value to our museum is its collection. And we took a little behind the scenes tour a few episodes back with Chris Plouffe, where he toured us the storage facility. But I know that there's also collections within the museum. Can you tell us a little bit about the collection space that we have in behind the walls of our actual museum? What is in there? Maybe one of these days we could go behind the scenes and take our members there virtually. But
Mhm.
for now, is there a story behind the collection and how it's grown over the years?
Well, I mean, of course, our museum is a regional museum focused on what we call Peninsular California, the Southern California and the Baja California Peninsula, and the oceans on either side of the oceans and gulfs on either side of that landmass. And so our fossil collections reflect that regional focus. And, um, and we collect fossils from a variety of different time periods, going back to the Cretaceous, when we still had dinosaurs in this area. And we have some of the only dinosaurs found in California were found in San Diego County and are housed at our museum, both up in the collections, but also on the exhibit floors. And then we have this amazing array of fossils from the last 65 million years of Earth history, marine fossils and non-marine fossils. And I'm especially interested in marine mammals. So we have a really good collection of marine mammals: whales, baleen whales, toothed whales, sea cows, walruses, and sea lions. And which are, I guess have to say, my favorite fossils, because I'm so interested in what those fossils have to tell us about the evolutionary history of this amazing group of mammals who decided independently, actually, I should say, to put their toes in the water and reinvade the sea various times in the last 50 million years, I guess, of Earth history.
That's so interesting. So you kind of touched point on the one kind of type of specimen and something from the collection that is special of interest to you, and with the marine mammals. And but there was a question that just came up right now, Tom, from Jessica Sportelli, that I was asking, how often do we acquire new specimens for the collection? So can you tell us a little bit about the process of how our collection grows, or do we acquire new specimens?
Well, the vast majority of the fossils in our collections have been collected by museum employees. And I mean, I can say that, I mean, in part that's because we have paleontologists that work for the museum that are in the field every day. Because I guess we're kind of unique. Well, we are unique, I guess, for a California museum, for any museum in the US, in that we have let's say, an applied science side of what we do. We do paleontological consulting, the museum does, related to environmental impact work. So whenever you see Caltrans building a new freeway, like the State Route 52, when they were extending 52 east to Santee over Fortuna Mountain, there were museum paleontologists on the ground following the earthwork, the bulldozers and the scrapers, collecting fossils. So we collect fossils on a very regular basis. In fact, I'm trying to think this week what we found this week. And I'd have to look, but last week we found some interesting marine fossils, shells and so forth, from a deposit up in the Carmel Valley area. They were about 45 million years old. So we have a lot of fossils that are coming in the museum on a regular basis.
Wow. So whenever we're seeing Caltrans doing new highway repairs or doing new highway construction, a lot of times that's where our collections come from, and that's where we're acquiring all these specimens from. Vicky actually kind of posted another question right now, Vicky Rowley. With the lower sea levels of the past, is it possible other sites like the Cerruti Mastodon site are underwater? And if so, where might be the best place to look for other sites? Kind of, can you maybe talk a little bit about the Cerruti Mastodon site, and then would there be possibilities of other sites like that existing today?
Well, we certainly hope there are. That, yeah, the Cerruti Mastodon site it was found on a Caltrans construction site on the State Route 54, the South Bay Freeway. Back in 1992, 93, the winter, it was an El Nino winter. We remember a lot of rain flooded our excavation. But this was a site in Pleistocene or Ice Age deposits that we've since dated at 130,000 years plus or minus 9. And this one particular bed that we collected from, and we collected fossils from about throughout a 30-foot thick sequence of stratified deposits that accumulated in an ancient branch of the Sweetwater River. And this one particular layer contained broken bones and tusks and cheek teeth of an American mastodon in a very strange arrangement. And as we excavated this, we created a map that you would like, kind of like a crime scene investigation map, where you have the outline of the carcass, right? You know, the body, and then you have where the shell casings were, and or other pieces of evidence. And in this sense, we excavated over a 50 square meter area of parts of this mastodon, and the arrangement of fossils and the fact that some fossils were missing, and we found these rocks in there, suggested this was a human occupation site. Well, not an occupation, but a work site where they processed the skeleton of American mastodon 130,000 years ago. So obviously controversial. We have an exhibit at the museum on it right now, which unfortunately you can't see, but you can go on our website and learn more about it. But to look for more sites like that, we have to look in rocks of that age that occur actually above sea level today. But going back just 18,000 years ago, sea level was up to 400 feet below where it is today. So just for a minute, think about sea level dropping 400 feet, and it would expose the continental shelf. You could walk from, well, you couldn't quite get to San Clemente Island on a walk because there's a deep trench between there, but you can get pretty close to it, much closer than today.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there is evidence of human occupation on the continental shelf. Off of La Jolla shores, for instance, there have been artifacts found, but those are much younger. They're younger than 130,000, but they could date to 12,000, 14,000, 15,000. It would be really exciting. And, but it's hard to do underwater archaeology.
I can definitely see the challenge. That in itself is a different challenge than the one that we're all currently in right now, which is COVID-19. And it's hard to mention anything without saying and mentioning the pandemic. But yeah, I can imagine how difficult it would be to do an archaeology dig site underwater. But how has COVID and the pandemic changed or impacted the work that you do, Tom, or the department itself? It sounds like construction still continues, and we still have applied sciences that are going out. But for the most part, how has it impacted the paleontology department?
Well, I'm at home. It's impacted, my work schedule in that respect. But I'm still pretty busy. I go into the museum 2 days a week. Our department, because we do half of our department is in the field every day, it hasn't impacted that aspect of our department. And our staff is about 16 individuals. And again, this is the applied science. There's also the pure science part of it, the research side of what we do, and the collections care side of what we do. But we've managed to keep busy throughout the pandemic, and because what we do is a fee for service, it brings revenue into the museum, which has helped obviously the museum and helped us keep our staff both within our department but within the museum in general, because we our activities contribute to the bottom line, as they say. But obviously, you know, the whole thing about social distancing and being safe and being considerate of others in a let's say a more expanded manner than we were used to. I mean, it's been an impact. We haven't been able to do some of the field work that we want to do because park areas have closed. For instance, we have plans to do some work out on the Northern Channel Islands, and the park has been closed, so we haven't been able to do that. And we can't have visitors and visiting researchers. We can't, in terms of my own research, I can't travel to other museums to collaborate on projects. But on the positive side, we learned to do meetings like this and extend the reach of the museum and meet people on a regular basis throughout the US and internationally. I get to spend more time with my grandchildren.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, which is bittersweet. Some days it's a little more hectic and I can't get quite as much done as I want to during that time that they're here. Yeah, I mean, I think we've all come to adapt to this a bit. We hope that we can return to some semblance of normalcy sooner than later, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you were mentioning how we were able to hopefully, you know, soon rather than later return to some sort of familiar experiences. And we kind of mentioned a little bit of maybe down the road we can do a virtual behind the scenes tour, but going into the future, you know, if we were to go to a behind the scenes collections tour with you, Tom, where would you take us specifically to show off one of your favorite specimens? Do you have a favorite specimen that you would want everyone to see? And if so, what would it be?
Well, it's hard to have a favorite, right?
I
Because
know it's like saying, who's your favorite kid?
yes, exactly. But the thing about fossils and the way I look at them is that they are messengers from the past, right? That are waiting to tell us stories. And I often will pick up a fossil. Oh,
Oh yes, we're gonna get a.
so this is actually a cast of a fossil that I've been studying, but it's an early whale. This is the blowhole right here, and it's about 26 million years old from Washington State, and actually it's from Oregon, and it's an early whale, and it has a lot to say. So sometimes I hold it up to my ear, right, to see hello, but these fossils tell us about the history, and so all of them are really exciting in that sense. Even a clam shell has a lot that it can tell us about the past. It can tell who am I, the taxonomy, can tell where did I live, something about the environment, who did I live with, something about the ecosystem that it inhabited, what was the climate like. All of these sorts of questions can be answered by individual fossils. But to get to your question, one of the fossils I often show people is walrus fossils that we've collected from Chula Vista. In fact, I named it in 1994, Balanictus chulavistensis. That's the species name, chulavistensis. It's on display in Fossil Mysteries, one of the specimens. But one specimen in particular is the partial skeleton of a female Balanictus chulavistensis. It was collected by the Sharp Hospital down in Chula Vista. And nearly complete skull, parts of the lower jaw, neck vertebrae, complete forelimbs, including hands. Of course, we would call them flippers, but they have 5 digits in the hand, just like we do. It's a universal feature of amniotes, like from frogs to humans, right? Yeah. And it's just so amazing to see the specimen. And she had arthritis, and you can see these osteological pathologies preserved in the bone. So there's all sorts of nuance within that specimen to encapsulate this idea of history. And I also show that in contrast with a skull of a male Paleonyctus, which is a much larger animal. And this size difference is what's called sexual dimorphism. It's characteristic of animals that are harem breeders. So you can kind of get into the reproductive strategy of an animal that lived 3.5 million years ago. Plus, what are walruses doing in Chula Vista? You know, it's like, huh? That walruses evolved at this latitude or even farther south, and they've only within the last million years adapted to or dispersed to and adapted to an Arctic lifestyle. So it's really quite interesting in that respect. And there's all this other sorts of stuff. What's with the tusk? They don't feed with the tusk. It's just a social display structure like antlers in a deer. So I mean, all these stories can be told from just a few fossils, and it's pretty exciting.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely can see that. I can see when you brought up the fossil specimen to your ear and telling the stories, I could just see kids everywhere like wanting to know all the stories that come out of that skull and come out of that fossil. But it's one of those things that it's just fascinating.
And this particular fossil, I'm just finishing up a manuscript that we're submitting to a British journal, but this animal has teeth, but it's a baleen whale animal. And it has features on the palate that suggests that it actually had baleen too. And one of the earliest examples of a transitional animal that had both baleen and teeth. Not baleen like we'd see in a modern humpback whale, but rudimentary baleen. But
wow.
Pretty exciting too.
Yeah, no, I could see all the stories that come out of that with finding little things, little either fossils or little tidbits that you would think would be not really that important. But another question that came up right now, Tom, was from Donna. When finding a fossil, how are you able to determine sex, male or female, or is there anything specific that you look for when you're determining that in the fossils that we collect?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. And of course, each organism has its own, let's see, characteristics that might be clues to whether it's male or female. In the case of the walruses, it's really size, both body size and the size of the tusks. And we make that comparison to modern animals and say when we have this extreme sexual dimorphism in an animal like a walrus or a sea lion, the males are usually larger. Now in baleen whales, the females, in sperm whales, the females are larger. So you have to think of what the modern analog is you're looking at.
Yeah.
But it's not always easy to tell the sex of a fossil. So we're fortunate with the walrus, but most animals, it's difficult, if not impossible, to tell if they're male or female.
Yeah, well,
like a
folks,
clam, I couldn't tell.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate all of the questions that have been coming in, and we definitely value everyone's time and opportunity to connect with us here at this member meetup. Tom, we're wrapping up our, this, if you can believe it, our time is up. But is there any last few things that you want to share with our members that, what you're looking for the future of the museum for paleontology, specifically for your department? What is it that you're looking forward to, future years from now, as we're kind of getting, post-pandemic time, but even more so afterwards? Is there anything that you'd like to share with everyone?
Well, of course, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that we have a wish list of what fossils we're looking for, right? Because we know they're out there. So getting back to the Cerruti mastodon site, a wish list would be to find another site like that has, let's see, more easily acceptable specimens in it, like let's just say it might have a human remain in it, like a finger or an arm or something of a human. That would really clinch the deal.
Yeah.
Another site like that would be really important. And then there's fossils that we're looking for that, like it'd be nice to find. We know that there's primates from the Eocene rocks here, and we've collected over 100, thousands of specimens, but they represent about 10 species. But we have very few skulls. In fact, we only have one skull. So I'd like to find a couple of skulls of these Eocene primates. These are 45 million year old primates, little small tarsier and lemur sized things. But anyway, we have a wish list. So that's what I'm looking forward to, finding those fossils.
It's so great to hear that our paleontology department has a wish list, and
Yes.
a lot of times wish lists they vary differently, and it's great to hear the paleontologist side of their wish list for finding more specimens and finding more remains to kind of share more of the story of our region that we have here. But Tom, thank you so much for taking time with us. We appreciate you spending some time with our members and connecting with us and sharing a little bit behind the scenes of what's still happening in the museum, even though our doors are closed to the public. But Tom, thank you again so much. We're going to bring back Emily. She has a few tidbits to share. I know there's some other upcoming events that she would like to remind everyone of. But again, Tom, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
It would certainly be nice to be able to see everybody that's here joining us this morning. So thanks for your time.